Welcome everybody, and greetings. This is America Disclosing Uncensored. You know me, Michael Anthony. Sometimes I say, "What's in the skies?" Have you been looking up? I mean, we can only imagine, right? We can only imagine how this has all come from up there, maybe possibly being down here. With me today is one of the most fascinating people in the planet. I mean, a man of travels who's hit all the continents. You're still waiting to go underwater, correct?
I'm scuba diver. I've been underwater.
Yeah, Greg Hancock does some of that stuff too, but you guys do
Yes, it
wonders.
does.
Listen, guys, 19 books. Your most recent, and I didn't have a lot of time to prepare because I was so excited to have you on. That was the Future Esoteric.
That's one of my three in the esoteric series. The latest is actually Beyond Esoteric,
Oh, my
Escaping
apologies.
Prison Planet. Yeah, but there's
My,
three in the series, also Modern Esoteric.
wow, but still, all that's a great deal of information. So you're a publisher, an explorer. Let's just call it the way it is. You're a historian of many things. Everybody, this is Brad Olsen. And I hope I pronounced that right. I get some of my pronunciations wrong. Some people's names are a little difficult, but it's such a pleasure to have you here. It's overwhelming for me because I look up to you. You're one of the people that I look up to in the world. You're fascinating. You're giving disclosure on many subject matters that people have interest. I'm working as well, like with other people and of good background and intelligence, where I do try to do shows with them to keep people informed. And I think that's what you're all about, giving people the facts of history that are factual, of what you can find now in real time, not because we see things or heard about things 100 years ago and then seeing some of the Mandela effect changed them, as one may say. But one of the most fascinating things, as I was saying to you, behind in the green room, so to speak, as they call it that, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that fascinating voyage across the world, basically, to get to the Antarctic.
Yeah, that was exactly 5 years ago. And it was bookended with a trip to and from South America. So I was down there for 4 months, including 26 days on a sailboat to the northern tip of the Palmer Peninsula, as well as a whole bunch of islands down there. And that rounded out all 7 continents. So now I can say I've truly been to all the big land masses of the world. And it was quite a voyage, Michael. I was, seasick on the way down, quite violently ill. But those are the stormiest seas of the world on the Drake Passage, and it just comes with the territory. Even people on big cruise ships, about 50% of them get seasick down there crossing the Drake Passage. So it was a treacherous voyage, but we made it, lived to tell about it, and what a trip it was.
Yeah, I know a lot about that trip. A lot of people don't, but was there a particular reason why you had to focus on that? Was it all about because of the theories that rest there of the past 75 years of the possibility of this, that, the other, the whistleblowers, other stories that come out? Is that what drew you there?
Well, yeah, it was. As far as I know, I'm the only researcher in this field who went down there to look into paranormal activity, UFOs under the ice, pyramids poking through, or antediluvian civilization. And while many of my questions about those subjects went unanswered at the 6 bases we went to and talking to pilots and captains of boats who go down there, if they have seen any of this stuff. And routinely the answer was no. But I did find out some things I wasn't expecting, and that is there is definitely a big no-fly zone over a portion of the South Pole. And that's pretty interesting because that also happens to correspond where Admiral Byrd said there's a giant hole in the ice there. And one of Linda Moulton Howe whistleblowers, Brian S., also said he witnessed it there. They don't want you flying over it because they don't want you to see it. And also found out that one of the other Argentinian bases which happens to be not too far away from the German land claim of New Schwabenland called Belgrano 2 base, had a UFO flyover sighting by all the people at that base one day. And so they talked about it and got to the other base that I was at called Brown. And they told us about it, that this was a big news for that season, that some of their comrades had seen craft flying over. So it is chock full of mysterious, paranormal UFO sightings down there. And that's why I'm trying to get back there with the film crew and go to take a look at some of these mysteries. Just this morning, I did an interview with a guy from VC Cross, a venture capital company, and we're trying to raise $10 million to go back there next season to do a documentary, to go to all these locations and try to see if we can uncover some truth about what's really going on down there.
Okay. Sounds interesting. And that's a big mission to come up with 10 million. You know, I've worked in the movie industry. I was behind scenes, even in some of the smallest perks known as craft services. But sometimes I was in production location, and I would, have to work out all the tangible agreements between everybody for and time and scenarios and so forth. So doing that, I understand the enormity of a project like that and what it would take. But I get why you're doing it. And it's because, I think you've reached a pinnacle in life where you're seeing facts, you have knowledge, you have information that's come to you in many ways that probably describe many of the things that you weren't able to see your first time there. So hats off to you with that. Is there anything though that in research and learning, since you've been there and back, listening to other people, Nobel Prize winners of the largest compliment you can give somebody when it comes to journalism and disclosure, have they instilled any ideas of thought into your mind, like the opening of the cave that's possibly there where Berg flew into, and then the gravity of military forced compliance that kind of blew up in the United States of America's face, and we were faced with, I don't know, I'm going to say this with careful thought, the possibility of something called a honeyboo. Am I saying something like
Honeyboo?
Honeyboo. So the honeyboo with the cross and insignia of Germany that were flying around us, just ripping us apart.
Yep. Yeah. So that is one of the subjects in my book, Beyond Esoteric. And I do have a schematic drawing of the honeyboo craft, as well as a photograph of the very infamous flyover of several craft over Washington, D.C. Capitol in July 1952.
Yeah. I love that story.
And any UFO researcher worth their weight in salt will tell you that those are not aliens. Those were the Antarctica honeyboo or flying craft. Admiral Byrd called them flugorods, was his name for disc-shaped craft that escorted him to the domain of the Ariani under the ice, according to his biography or his diary.
Correct.
So he was coming back after Operation High Jump, which went very terribly for his ship of Armada. And 2 months into the 6 months expedition of Operation High Jump in 46 and 47, he's coming back through Chile, and they needed to restock and refuel. And a journalist from El Mercurio newspaper came aboard his ship, and he gave an interview to this guy, and he said that we would be confronted with an enemy that can fly pole to pole at incredible speeds. And so now most people are reevaluating what the DC flyover was, and that was basically to send a message to the Pentagon and Washington, D.C. that we can fly right over the most sensitive airspace in the world. You can't even shoot us down. So you better go along with our plan. And indeed, one of the books I just published, Laura Eisenhower, who is a great granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, there's new whistleblower testimony that she reprints in her book, Awakening to the Truth Frequency, just released 2 days ago, that Truman, who was still president in July 1952 during that flyover, signed surrender treaties to the Fourth Reich. Now that has huge implications. That's a part of history hardly anybody knows about. And Eisenhower, her great-grandfather, inherited a very terrible deal, and he had to deal with it. He was known saying during his administration, because they were backward engineering a lot of this technology at Area 51 here in Nevada, the state I'm in, that he wanted to take the First Army and invade our own military base because they weren't telling him what was going on there or letting him in. Our own president. So this is why it's been going on for decades, this kind of secrecy. And of course, at the end of his term in 1960, he made that famous speech warning about the undue power of the military-industrial complex. And we sure see that today in what we call the deep state and the cabal, this conglomerate of corporations and unseen hands that basically control industry, government, politics, media, you name it. They basically accumulated everything. And you think that they'd won, but they still need to win over the hearts and minds of the people. They're trying to do it in a deceptive way, but I think people are waking up to this agenda and taking the words of Dwight D. Eisenhower to task, that we have this behemoth in these private corporations that have taken over in such a way that they now have untold amount of power in the form of this technology that's been gleaned from these backward engineered craft.
Right. That's very interesting. And to be, yeah, I remember Laura coming on shows like Jimmy Church and so forth years ago, being very open and forthcoming about, some of the informations as you're describing. I don't want to say too much here because with a new book coming out, I don't know what all's in it, but I would like for people to support Laura and your work as well. So they can read about it and learn about it as you're out there. So dropping the tidbits is always a beautiful thing. And I thank you for that. But yeah, so a lot of people are totally aware of this and the supposed missing time that took place. Her grandfather was not in the best position at all when you think about it. And there's another story out there that has some similarities to this that they call Planet Serpo. That's been streaming about the possibility. Some may look at it as fictional or maybe factual. It depends how you look at it and who Anonymous really is behind the scenes, because a lot of us don't know. Is he part of the DIA? I mean, who are these people? The same as I got a question for you, because I heard you bring this up before in one of your, I don't remember if it was a lecture you were doing that I caught a live version of, or if you were doing an interview where you say no such agencies.
Yeah.
What is the no such agencies?
Well, that's the NSA. And the NSA was formed right around the time of the CIA, MJ-12. This is in the late 1940s. But the NSA, National Security Agency, did not even admit its own existence until the 1980s. And that's where it got the nickname No Such Agency. But they were tasked, and still are to this day, because they have a presence in Antarctica, not only an unmarked building at McMurdo Station that the NSA operates out of, but they also have a presence at the South Pole, monitoring that giant hole in the ice. And so the NSA was formulated they were tasked to retrieve down craft. So this is right after Roswell crash in 1947. They needed a secret agency to go out to these sites to retrieve the craft, dead or live aliens. They were responsible for either shipping the dead ones to Wright-Patterson in Ohio. That's where they all go. And an interesting little tidbit, it was Jackie Gleason, remember him from the Honeymooners?
Oh,
He had a huge interest in anything extraterrestrial, and he was good buddies with Richard Nixon.
Yeah, his home was a UFO, right?
That could be. Yeah, he was super fascinated with it. And he was good buddies with Richard Nixon, who had been a governor in California, in Southern California. And so they knew each other. And he asked him a favor. He's like, I really want to see some of this stuff. And I know it's at Wright Pat. And they went underground, and Nixon escorted Jackie Gleason, and they saw gray aliens and big test tubes, as the story goes. And it blew his mind. So that's where the dead aliens go. And this is, again, run by the NSA. Live aliens, they interrogate, and some of them go to what's known as the clean sphere. And that's next to Area 51 on the Nellis Air Force Base in southern Nevada at the facility called S4. And Bob Lazar had talked about this, that they have live aliens in this zone underground base called the clean sphere, probably because they breathe different air and they can't be exposed to our viruses or any other bacteria or whatnot. But an interesting thing about Area 51, and maybe the reason why S4 is out there in the middle of the desert, once in a while, some of these ETs will escape, the gray aliens, and they'll try to run across the desert and somehow telepathically try to make communication get picked up. But it really hurts their feet to walk on sand. So oftentimes the security, which is Wackenhut, private security firm, will pick them up standing on a log. They can't make it any further, and they can't escape. So that's probably why the base is in a high desert area where it's at.
Right. That's very interesting. And again, another story that if people don't know about is something that you could research yourself. I always try to tell everybody it's not what we can tell you or deliver. At times, some people need a different type of validation, and it's in the book. It's in this distinguished man's book, as well as Laura Eisenhower's made mention of it in the past. So if you seek to know more and gain more knowledge, like I have through my life, you would want to check out the books, like and follow to the people that you most look upon who have the best information or the information that best intrigues you. Because if you go with your gut instinct, that is probably where you will find the answers that you seek. And you know, again, just for everybody to know, this is Brad Olsen. He's a publisher. He's just a marvel of a man. Been through across the entirety, pretty much of the world, doing research and published 19 books. Plus, you publish other people's books. I mean, you're just fascinating. And what you're bringing forth here today just is incredible. You're bringing up things that I think people know about, putting them into a context for them to have a surety in some ways to further research for themselves as well, or to come out and watch you at a lecture. And if I could do anything to help promote you throughout the pages, I have 100 of them floating around through ufology, unearthed. I mean, you name it. When it comes to America Disclosing, I am the theory of everything you write. The big CT man, you know, they used to say at one point they called me a conspiracy theorist, then they started calling that joke not on you. I had views bigger than most people that had content on YouTube, and it came across as conspiracy terrorist, and I was like, whoa, you know. And then one day I woke up and I vanished. No, I vanished. So we hear about people like that too, and I think even Michael Solis has made mention of. I think he's a friend of yours. And a few other people out there who say people's lives go missing, just like Bob Lazar's background, his education. These are direct impacts that can be placed because how much power they have and technology. Where do you stand on that? Do you think that some of those things are factually true of how people and the pressure of disclosure being released too fast, or not by the right personnel, so to speak, that people come under that axe, so to speak?
Yeah. And actually, the more infamous or famous you become to those alphabet agencies, the safer you become. A good friend of mine in this field is David Hatcher Childress. He's one of the stars on Ancient Aliens, and I appeared on a couple episodes in season 6, but he's in virtually every one. And he's also a book publisher and an author, and does other authors as well. And we talk a lot about the industry, and this subject that we're involved with is just really to many fantastical or woo-woo. But to me, this is the most important thing any of us could endeavor to understand, is our place in this world and the cosmos above, and the exopolitics that has to do with all this. And David Childress told me a long time ago, he goes, you want to try to get as popular or notorious as you can. It'll actually protect you, because then they can't just take you out. You know, they can do that to an anonymous person, or maybe an author with a book that hasn't sold that much. Is it you want to not to boost your ego or to try to inflate yourself, but for your own protection. And he also said, don't ever own a gun, because if they wanted to suicide you, they'll use your own gun and say, oh, there you go. He pulled it on himself and whatever.
Right. He hung from a tree, but yet he had a wound to his own chest. I mean, theoretically, we see that the people who surround many of those things. I'm trying not to go off on the big P political thing, but it's part of the entirety of the agenda when you really look at it as to a two-sided government doing two things, running a country on a lie in some ways. And it's not just a marginal thing. It's an enormous immensity of fact of how I believe things work behind the scenes. But it also blows my mind that they get away with it. And of course they can't, because it's not a thing of superficial or fiction. It's fact that many, and it doesn't even matter if they're talking about ufology or, whatever, what you would think would be a safe subject. It comes across a political uniform platform of something that we just don't understand the strength of it. And the complexity, and it is that strong, and the complexity is that dangerous. But it keeps guys like you going. I think that's kind of like your battery. It's my battery. I'm on restrictions on every platform just because I say one word wrong. And I said the other night on the show, I says, how many words in the alphabet do we have to remove? Webster would be turning in his grave, because everything seems to be a violation, or in some way suppression, where we lose our stability of thought. It's not that we ever lose the voice, but if they can crush the thought, that's what they want to instill the fear upon, your thought pattern. It's sad. It's very, very sad, but again, not to take this, I have you on to talk and to inform us. And I know you have a lot more behind all this. And as you said, in case somebody's just joining us, I see people popping in and out here and there. You do want to go back to the Antarctic. This might be a good title for you. I'm just saying, this is as a joke, something that friends can do, even though we're new acquaintances. The Antarctic, the new white desert. I don't know. I mean, so what's on the other side? Some people say that there's woolly mammoth. There's these other things. Do you find any fact behind some of those? And is that the other reason you want to go to do more?
Yeah, well, look at Antarctica as the least explored and least understood region of the world. It's basically what is below the ice, which is 2-mile deep polar plateau in eastern Antarctica. And the greatest depths of the ocean are the last explored, least understood areas of the world. So there's still mystery out there. And Admiral Byrd, after he came back from that trip, and they saw a woolly mammoth. In his diary, he writes about it, that they couldn't believe their eyes at first when they were being escorted into the domain of the Ariani, as he describes it. Keep in mind that Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent of the world. So there is a propensity for large domes underneath the ice that have been heated up from geothermal activity.
Right.
And indeed, that's where the Germans set up their main base in New Schwabenland in the late 1930s. There was a pilot who flew off their boat called Schwabenland, and that's an area named from Germany, a region there, and that gave it the region New Schwabenland for the Germans. And he flew a boat with pontoons on it, a plane with pontoons off the ship with an exploration crew. And they landed in what's called the Schumacher Ponds. These are lakes that never freeze in Antarctica. And the pilot was named Schumacher. He stayed behind with the plane, and he was doing some tests to check the thermocline of the water, indeed finding it warmer as he went down and did his tests. Usually any lake you jump into, it's warmer on the top and colder on the bottom. So he knew it was heated with geothermal energy. Plus, the whole area around there, which is called the Schumacher Hills, where base 211 is located,
Right.
also never freezes over with ice. So the whole land is also warmed by geothermal heat. It's what's known as Antarctica desert. So maybe in a way it is kind of like sand on the snow, and the Sahara is the snow. So his crew left for about a week to go explore and find a under ice river that they could get their U-boat submarines up to, and they did. So this is one of the locations we want to go to with the documentary film. And wouldn't it be fascinating to just be there and film in the Schumacher Hills and the Schumacher Ponds, but also to maybe we'll find some kind of trace of the German base there. So this is what we're proposing with VC Cross, the venture capital company that's trying to raise the money to go down there next season. See, of course, seasons are opposite there. So right now it's the very tail end. It's mid-November till mid-March. Every year is the summer down there.
Okay.
Just like it's the winter and early spring up here.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Hey, one of the things that goes in the back of my mind, and it's not because we see certain things, although, television and Hollywood and all these things, everything's in place for some type of reason or speculation of catastrophic and ELEs and all these other typical scenarios that are being force fed through the television sets right now. But more than that, we've seen a lot of things that were putting times and places where the German Reich, so to speak, or the breakaways were always on a mission or their own type of quest for ancient history and relics and the unknown and things like that. Do you think that they that was part of why they went there? Did they possibly know something, or possibly a story that stems out from the 1850s where they actually retrieved early crashes and were making contact through some type of radar communication laser device with a technology of some other entities who then helped them? Because I mean, when we look at this in 1952, the newspapers printed those pictures, that you described earlier, going over the Capitol. But there was also another place in China called the Pink House, that also had the same disturbing event occur. It's pretty, mind blowing that certain scenarios of countries all were experiencing a similarity.
That's right. And also keep in mind that Antarctica is huge. You could fit 2 continental United States within the boundaries of the landmass of Antarctica. It's the 5th largest continent in the world. So the distances are so vast. The Germans could have chosen anywhere on the continent, but they chose this particular area for a reason, like you said. And I think it's because they found something there. So one of the first things they did with the planes they brought down on the Schwabia boat was to fly around the perimeter of New Schwabenland and drop these 1.5 meter long darts with a swastika on them. That was their justification for a land claim. But right in the middle of New Schwabenland is this seasonal base. They're only out there in the summer months, called Conan. And so when I'm poring over maps before my trip 5 years ago, I noticed this base, and I'm looking at pre Berlin Wall coming down. So before the Cold War ended, when Germany was separated into Eastern and Western Germany.
Yeah.
And right there on this old map is West German bases are still in New Schwabenland, which are now German bases. So they never left. They've been there the whole time since the late 1930s. And I think it's because they found something under the ice at this Conan base. So there's a lot of chatter going around in 2013 that, and you can still go back on the Wayback Machine on Google Earth to 2013 with the GPS coordinates of the Conan base, Konhen, and they were uncovering something there that was poking through the ice, and they had excavated away a lot of the ice. And you can see what looks like a giant machine or a grill on top of a motor, but it's a quarter mile long. It's massive. And there was another area where it was orange colored snow, like they're pulling out rusty material is my best guess, but there's a runway there, and you could see a seasonal base and some snowmobile tracks out there. So in 2013, they were doing a major excavation at the Conan base. And I have this in my presentation called The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica. And I'll be giving this talk at the MUFON Symposium in July down in Dallas, Texas, in front of 700 people and simulcast to all the MUFON branches at once. So I'm very honored to be asked to present this. And of course, I'll show these images from 2013.
Right.
But I think that the Germans, when they were doing their flyover, had noticed this thing sticking out of the ice. Because as you mentioned, they had been so technologically advanced and had collected so much in the way of ancient technology, as well as recovering craft themselves. So there was a very famous UFO that crashed in the Black Forest of Germany in the early 1930s, which of course their engineers just all over it. They just want to look at it every possible way. Germany was so far advanced. By the end of 1939, they were already doing test flights with their UFO Flugelrods or Honeyboo craft, the Vril technology. And part of that was another craft that was recovered in the Lombardy region of Italy. And Mussolini had allowed the German scientists to come in and work on that. And that was nearly intact craft. That was practically flyable. So it was quite a boon to their engineers. So after World War II, we got a whole bunch of their scientists come over to America in Project Paperclip, including Werner von Braun, who invented the first jet propelled not only the V1 and the V2, but the first jet airplanes. And they were flying past our pilots using turbo, just prop flight, just zooming past them, and they couldn't believe how advanced the technology was at the end of World War II. So Hermann Oberth was another scientist that came over, and when asked how did Germany get so advanced so quickly, he remarked that we had help from the people above. So pretty much, yeah, admitting that they had an association with ETs.
So many connections of the dots and pieces of the puzzle you're filling in here, but factually true. It's mind blowing. And one of the other things too is everybody had to get a piece of the ice cube, and it's almost like, if I'm not mistaken, oh, I don't know where I heard this just recently, maybe in the past 6 months, maybe, that there are some countries of you wouldn't think would be influenced to want a piece of the ice cube or one of the ice cube portions in the East. That there's now like a an interest. I don't know, remember if it was in Iraq. I should do my homework before coming on with somebody as strong as you that knows this so well. But did you hear anything about a rumor about Iraq or somebody in the East, or a country in the East now putting their land marker in place in the Antarctic as well?
Yeah, that's Iran.
Iran. I'm
Just a
sorry.
few
Okay.
weeks ago
Uh,
announced that they are going to build a base in Antarctica. And get this, not on the coast where most of the bases are located,
okay.
but inland at the South Pole, where the hole in the ice is.
Oh,
So
really?
again, Antarctica could be the gateway to disclosure. Who knows? Maybe the Iranians want to push the envelope here a little bit and announce the hole in the ice. I don't know if they're going to ever get that far. I think the NSA is going to block them at every turn as far as bringing in supplies to build a base. Of course, you need to bring everything you need there. Nothing grows in Antarctica. There's no trees, there's no bushes, there's nothing green there. It's 99% covered in ice. So it's a very inhospitable climate. Coldest temperatures on the planet, routinely recorded down there at the Vostok station, which is a Russian base, and that's located right above Lake Vostok. A lot of people don't know that one of the top 10 largest freshwater lakes in the world is located under the ice in Antarctica. And the Russians finally did a probe down there and got a sample of water not even 10 years ago, found out that there was a form of bacteria that came off of a fish that's as yet identified. So there's even life forms that live under the ice there that we don't even know about yet. So it's such a fascinating place with so many mysteries. And then when you consider the propensity for these large domes, such as over Lake Vostok, to exist, which Lake Vostok, of course, never freezes. So it must be heated with geothermal energy as well. And one of those fault lines goes right through Antarctica, right through New Schwabenland, Schumacher Ponds, and continues on up through the mid-Atlantic Ridge, which is an under the ocean volcanic fault line that goes all the way up to Iceland, which is having another volcano erupting right now too. Iceland is called the land of fire and ice. And you could say Antarctica is the land of fire and ice as well.
Interesting. In a good way. Interesting in a good way, because it keeps us, on that hunt for research. And no, it really does for me anyway. Because you're laying on some things here where I got to open my mind and twist and turn the objectives of how I think, because I'm still stuck in ways on understanding a lot of what you're mentioning. But I'm also still thinking about, why was it so important also for public dignitaries to get up there to socialize around an event, and which some call one of the arcs of the 10 that we believe are 10 exist, of the Ark of Gabriel, that needed to be taken there, and the Vatican had to send on special paperwork that told the Russian Pope on how to deal with this item. Am I wrong there? I mean, you're shaking your head. Yeah. So, I mean, that's something a lot of people don't know about either. And the complexity of that story is kind of hard to accept. But I mean, look, Obama went there. Kerry went. We're talking about the day of the election, I think, too, which is like, wow, why the mystery there? Something profound happened.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the Ark of Gabriel, because, as you said, not many people know about that. So there was an incident in Saudi Arabia about 15 years ago when a crane collapsed and it killed a couple dozen people. Then shortly thereafter, just a week or two later, there was that stampede where hundreds of people died. Well, that's the cover story. What really happened was they had uncovered the Ark of Gabriel, and it had emitted a plasma discharge that killed these people on the site, and perhaps took down the crane. But what really killed the people was this plasma discharge. So the Saudis had no idea what to do, because this is in the town of Mecca, which is the biggest pilgrimage site in the world, where millions and millions of Muslims go every year. So they had to get this thing out of there, and they did not know what to do. So they appealed to the Russians, who seemed to know how to extract it. But there was this spiritual component to it as well. So the patriarch Krill, that's why he went down there right after they made this delivery of the Ark of Gabriel. And my understanding is they took it to a defunct reptilian base, is the way the story goes. But it is a known fact that the Russian Navy showed up at the port in Saudi Arabia called Jeddah with several ships. And after leaving the Red Sea, they beelined it straight down to Antarctica. And that's where Patriarch Krill went to bless this relic and to keep it in perpetuity in one of these defunct under ice bases. So I'm still trying to track down his exact whereabouts on that trip. And you mentioned the Pope, because right before Patriarch Krill went down there, he met with Pope Francis, who was giving an audience in Cuba at the time. And those two historically didn't get along. The Eastern, Orthodox Church and the Vatican Pope were always at odds with each other. But this time they got along just fine. And I think Patriarch Krill was kind of briefing the Pope on what he was going to do down there and the whole location of the Ark of Gabriel. So just another mystery, Michael, that just continues.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally right. And it totally is. But you're a visionary. And so, I mean, I know this is going to be a quest for you. And I hope to God that you can accomplish this, to put it together, to get over there to the New White Desert, so to speak, as I call it. But we all know what I'm talking about, to the Antarctic. Did you see any pyramids there?
We didn't on my trip. So just a little perspective, when we went down there in a sailboat, the trip was 26 days, 4 of those days to get down there and 6 of them to get back. So we had 15 full days in Antarctica, which is way more than you'd get on a cruise ship. They usually only get about 5 full days. And in that area along the northern part of the Palmer Peninsula, it's kind of considered the tourist alley where all the cruise ships and sailboat private ships go during the season. I know where those pyramids are. And the most famous one, that's 2 meter by 2 meter, or I should say 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, perfect 4-sided pyramid, is in the Ellsworth Range. And I talked to a travel group who we'll hire if we get the funding to go down there next season to do this documentary. And I showed them pictures of it, and they said, oh yeah, we know that spot. We fly over it. When they basically fly out of Punta Arenas, Chile, and they land at the Union Glacier on the Palmer Peninsula. And that's where they basically have to wait for the weather before they can get on the plane again and then go to where most of the tourists want to go climb the tallest mountain in Antarctica, called Vinson Massif. And it's about 14,500 feet. And it's everybody who's done all the highest peaks of the world. So if you've summited Mount Everest, gone up Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, and Mount McKinley, Denali in Alaska, and the second tallest, I don't know, let's say it right, it's Aconcagua, something like that, in Chile and Argentina, tallest mountain in South America. Once you've gone to all the top peaks, you got to go to Vinson Massif. So most of their clients just want to go there and do that mountain climb. But while they're flying over it, they go by the Ellsworth Range and they see this pyramid. But they don't consider it, they call it a nunatak, which is just a attractive mountain that sticks out on the ice. And I said, well, did you ever land there? Did you ever take a sample or climb it? I said, no, we just fly over it. So I think the jury's still out on that one. And that is part of the itinerary of this documentary. We would go to the Ellsworth Range pyramid and just check it out and then put it to rest. If it's just a nunatak, then so be it. But if it's a pyramid, just like this craft under the ice at the Conan base, could be an absolute game changer and would change history as we know it. And indeed, Antarctica could very well be the gateway to disclosure of our extraterrestrial romance over the many millennia, because it's also the rumored home of Atlantis. So keep in mind that Antarctica moved to its present location after one or a series of pole shifts. And this is known proven fact that at one time, Antarctica was a steaming jungle, could never have supported dinosaurs, or in the fossil record, you find ferns and flora that cannot grow there unless it had been a totally different climate. And if you look at Gondwana, when all continents were combined, Pangea, it broke off from basically the Indian Ocean. So from Africa to South Asia and Australia, and just kind of eastern Antarctica moved to its present position with the fossils intact. Whereas Western Antarctica broke off from the mid-Atlantic ridge, which I spoke of earlier, this highly volcanic area. And indeed, Western Antarctica is totally different landmass than Eastern Antarctica, very dramatic mountains that just come straight in the sea. That's where we went on our sailboat trip, where Eastern Antarctica is just a very flat, very old, over 3 billion year old plate of ground that broke off from this original landmass of Pangea. But it's in Western Antarctica that Dr. Michael Sala, who I was consulting with before I went down there 5 years ago, and has been sending me some of the stuff he gets from his whistleblowers, sent me GPS coordinates on Google Earth, where you can see a grid of perfect square rectangular buildings, what look like roads. So we'd like to go check that out too. And that could be another game changer. What if we were to find evidence of an ancient civilization, or it's known as antediluvian, before the time of ancient Egypt or Sumer, way, way older, perhaps tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years old, to show that there was an advanced civilization that had built on this continental landmass would be an absolute game changer.
Right. I agree. And, with everything, you just brought up, and the placement now where it sits, like the tectonic plate shifting, or the pole shift, knowing that it has that much power to move ground earth anywhere basically it wants to, if it gets angry, so to speak, I guess, or something that causes that magnetic shift to occur. And we know that it does. So with all that said, let me just, because I know we're at 45 minutes, I'm trying to respect your time. I know you're very, very busy, and I appreciate you so much for coming on. Everybody, if you don't know who this man is, get to know him. Get to know him. He's our best friend for disclosure. And when it comes into archaeology, and his 19 fascinating books out there, I mean, a lot of people like to read a lot. I do. I just want to go through to see if I missed anything, because you mentioned a couple things, but if you can be specific to this insignia on the honeyboo, was that a cross, or was that the swastika?
Well, Admiral Byrd just described it as German insignia. So I would take that to be the Iron Cross, which was the insignia that's been seen in photographs and videos of the honeyboo craft and other advanced technology that they had at the time. Benjamin Fulford, who does his report, he's come out with a new website, which is, I think it's called Beyond Bluebeam. It's something Bluebeam, Benjamin Fulford, it'll come up. And his latest one that just came out a week ago has videos of some of the German in-flight UFO craft, the Vril craft, the honeyboo craft. So there's old videos and diagrams and photographs and engineering schematics of these craft. There's quite a bit of evidence that they were very advanced with this technology in the 1930s and 1940s. And then it all went missing. That's one of the big mysteries at the end of World War II, is where did all this craft go? So there was a place in what is today Czech Republic called the Skoda Works, where they were doing a lot of this backward engineering, and Soviets were the first ones there They didn't find anything. In fact, the only thing they found were a couple scientists with a bullet in their head. They probably refused to go. And so then the rest saw what their fate would be if they didn't go. And at the very end of World War II, here's another bit of history that wasn't told, because we all know the saying that history is written by the winners, by the victors. Well, they don't want to admit that the final battle of World War II was a submarine battle, which the Germans won hands down. They had the most advanced submarines in the world. And so this is in Henry Stevens' book called Dark Sun, which has a lot of information about Antarctica as well, and the bases they set up down there. And he said that they were leaving. Hamburg was still a city that hadn't been taken yet, as well as other U-boat stations and what were called the Führer's convoy. So the largest submarines, which are as big as a container worth of material. So you could have some of these disassembled Honeyboo craft in these largest U-boats that were going down there. Indeed, after World War II, several months after surrender papers were signed and victory in Europe, some of these Führer convoy U-boats, 2 of them, showed up at El Plata, Argentina. And they had just come from Antarctica. Right. And so
imagine that. Right.
Imagine that. One of the captains finally spilled the beans. The others were just really tight-lipped and said, yeah, we were bringing supplies down there to their base. That's why Admiral Byrd was tasked in 1946 to go and confront this base 211 in New Schwabenland, and they had their ass handed to them in one day. The Battle of High Jump, as it's known. These craft came up out of the water. This is something people need to understand with UFOs. Not only can they fly at incredible speeds and do perfect 90-degree turns and fly interdimensionally if they're advanced enough, but they can also change the gravity around them. That's basically how they fly. They fly into a gravity field that they create, but they can also part the water and fly through the ocean as seamlessly as they can in the air. So these craft came up out of the water, and attacked the Armada. They could have taken out every single ship, couldn't shoot them down at all. But they just destroyed one ship in a show of force and then shooed the rest of the Armada off, take this message back to the Pentagon, and your superiors don't mess with us. But it's interesting because in 1958, we went down there with nuclear bombs, and this was called Project Argus. I describe it in my book. And Beyond Esoteric, I talk about it. And this is also a top secret operation right off the coast of New Schwabenland. Oh, they had to go all the way down there to shoot nuclear bombs into the upper atmosphere to see if they could get the pollution to escape. I mean, just a bonehead cover story.
Right.
So one of the other things we want to do in this documentary, Michael, is bring down some Geiger counters, because if we were to determine that nuclear bombs went off in New Schwabenland, that would be Project Argus getting revenge on the Antarctica Nazis and nuking them out of their base. So again, this could really be historic in what we find.
Something else has just come to light that I feel like it's a matter of importance, and I got to get this out of me to tell you, is also that they are now utilizing that same vicinity of area that we were talking about to now crash space junk into each other to destroy it. I wonder if that would, I don't know 100% if that's true, but that is what's been being leaked out through certain people who are investigating and doing some background investigative checking, that they're colliding, basically colliding like a collider, but not that one, space junk together because of how much we have up there. And I wonder if that is factually true, then your testing might be of, because they would think of somebody like you coming up to test against them, they would need an opposition. Oppositions defend a new narrative. So keep in mind, I don't know, but maybe through your intel and the people that you trust wholeheartedly, I know I have a few, but it doesn't mean that my people are right by any means, that is occurring. And if so, some of these things may have componentries that may pick up on those Geiger counters or whatever the technology term for that tool would be.
Right. And that would really make a lot of sense if they had done that, because the very following year, in 1959, the Antarctica Treaty, which is still in effect to this day, has very specific language in it that no country can ever test or even transport nuclear weapons, certainly not explode them. So specific. It's like, well, why do you have to be so specific about that unless it had already occurred? And so I think they did try to get some retribution for the very one-sided outcome in the Battle of High Jump early in 1947, just 11 years later, by nuking Base 211 that is located in the Schumacher Hills. So if we can get to go there, yeah, that would be really telling if we can detect any kind of radiation, because it would still be there.
Okay. It's something I really don't, know about, but I just wanted to share it with you because you get that light bulb, it goes off, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, And here me, I got this, my mind just goes, and my voice has to try to match with it. Look, I so much, with all respect, say this to you. Thank you for coming on. We're at that hour time, and I know you have to get going, and I'm going to respect that. Thanks for going the full hour. I really appreciate it. And I know you have a full schedule. Where are you going to be next? What's upcoming in the nearest future?
Driving down to Las Vegas to Sedona this weekend for the Sedona Ascension Retreat, a real big conference. I'll be speaking on Sunday about another TV show that I'm proposing called Operation New Earth with Suzanne Ross, the host. In April, I'm speaking in Boscop, Texas at the Team Light Solar Eclipse Festival. And then the following week, I'm at Alien Event in mid-August in Los Angeles. Then in May, I co-produce a street fair event in San Francisco called the How Weird Street Fair. That's on May 4th, downtown San Francisco. Tickets just went on sale yesterday. And in middle May, I fly out to Illinois for the Journey to Truth. In June, I'll be at Disclosure Fest, as well as another event in Las Vegas, and July at the Mount Shasta Summer Conference, and then some more coming up in the late summer and fall. I speak at about a dozen conferences every year, including the MUFON. Great honor to be invited to that in middle July to speak in front of their very educated and very aware audience, people that do all the research and collect all the reports for all UFO activity, not only across the nation, but around the world. So I'm doing my Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica. Before we came on in the green room, you asked about Laos, and I got a few minutes here to talk about that. I was just over in the country of Laos 6 weeks ago. My earlier books are about travel writing, and I've been a travel writer for 15 years. Most of my books are actually about travel writing and travel different locations around the world, sacred places around the world, sacred places North America, sacred places Europe, and a couple other of my earlier books. So I used to go to these travel conferences in Southeast Asia, and I was in Laos 20 years ago. And I knew about this location called the Plain of Jars. And so this time I got accepted on to this press trip, went out there about 6 weeks ago, and I got there a couple weeks before the conference started and took a night bus out to a town called Phone Savin and got out to the World Heritage Site, which is a big museum there, and explored the Plain of Jars. And it's scattered. These giant megalithic jars are scattered all around this town. It's not just the one site with a few hundred jars, but there's 1,325 intact jars. And in antiquity, there had been thousands. Many have been destroyed by tomb robbers, or in the Vietnam War, which they call the Second Indochina War, or it's also known as the Secret War in Laos. America carpet bombed this poor country because it had the Ho Chi Minh Trail that extended from North Vietnam through Laos and a little bit through Cambodia. And they just dropped so many bombs, more bombs that were dropped in Laos than in all of World War II. And there's still unexploded ordnances that go off and kill or maim someone every 2 weeks to this day. These little, they call them bombies, or little cluster bombs that were 300 or 400 in each bomb, and including at the Plain of Jars. It's just pockmarked with all these bomb craters around there, and including shattered jars. And they're 2 meters tall. They're really big. The biggest one at Site 1 by the museum there was 3 meters tall. So they were using them to fight the French during their War of Independence. And there are still trenches in there, trench warfare, and soldiers who died on the spot are buried in this area. And then the big question is, well, what were those jars used for? And in the museum, it says the legend is that they were built by the giants as drinking cups. And they don't have any idea how they were moved from the quarry to the present location. That's another big mystery. Lastly, they also say that it's considered a haunted site and sacred place, that the Buddhist monks will go there, make their blessings, but usually the locals stay away. It's kind of bad juju, because the archaeologists who have done the excavations there have found a lot of bones. It's a giant necropolis, at the very least, one of its functions, including right next to some of these jars are neatly stacked piles of human bones, not laid out like just a body was buried. So they call it a secondary burial process. And that is, they would put the recently deceased corpse in one of these jars, let it decompose, and then just pull out the bones and then neatly stack them and bury them around the jars. So each jar would be basically a funerary urn, or what we would know in our graveyards, like a mausoleum. Right. And the family of well-to-do families who were very wealthy, because this has always been a trade route, and they had excavated iron ore there, which they used to chisel out the jars. You can still see the markings and some of the tools in the museum. 500 BC to 500 AD is when they built thousands of these jars. But the question remains, maybe the legend is true that perhaps giants had a hand in it, because a 2 or 3 ton jar, which would be very heavy for little puny humans like us to move, wouldn't be so hard if you were an 18-foot tall giant, the Anunnaki or Nephilim, their offspring. So just look at the comparison. Say a child tries to lift a cinder block. Now, this big. To us, we just lift it with one hand and toss it around. Similarly, if they were many times larger than we were, and it's shown in the bones that have been discovered around the world that they were ginormous, that they were human-like, but not quite human. So, for example, they didn't have a central suture crack through their skull. Their eye sockets were 30% larger than humans. The skulls, the brain capacity was 30% larger. So when people say, well, they could have just been cranial deformation and wrapping the head or putting a board on it, moving their skull around. Yeah, you can do that. But what you cannot do is add 30% more brain mass. That's just impossible. Right. And these giant bones have been found around the world. And one of the things I do when I travel these locations is try to pick up the trail of the giants. And I'll tell you, Michael, almost routinely, if it's a megalithic site, it has either a legend of the giants, or sometimes the giant bones are found right there on the site.
Were you able to, while you were there and researching and everything and visiting all this and putting this picture together, you were near a museum site that exists down there. Am I correct? There is a museum site right
Yes.
on what they call Plateau 1 or something like that?
Is Site 1 Plain of Jars?
Yeah.
UNESCO World Heritage Site Museum. Yeah.
Right. I'm teaching myself the best I can. Did you come across any of the elongated cranials with the red hair and some of that type of subject matter?
Not at that site. Not for lack of trying, but it's also pretty common that if they do find giant bones, they're either traded, sold, or just gotten rid of. And Plain Jars only became a World Heritage Site in 2019. So almost all the artifacts and almost all the bones that were in the jars or even scattered around there and buried, funerary objects as well, are long gone. They were removed. So I can only go on the legend, what it says in the museum itself, that were created by giants and used as cups.
Right. And it makes sense. I mean, when you look at the enormity of what you're talking about, or I mean, I don't know. To me, that's the only plausible scenario that's a possibility over some of the other things. And unless again, you know, they were preparing maybe foods or wines or something like that, because some of these other things exist, but they're not on the same scale by any means. And we know that they were using things, or, and I think at one point I heard come through the grapevine, talking through a show with somebody, because I do some shows with people not within the United States, and sometimes I'll be a guest on their show. They look at me like I'm somebody special, but I'm not. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. But they talk about the lidding and so forth always being fine close by, and in these cases, with what you were seeing, there's never anything like a lidding, but there's brims or not brims in some cases.
Yeah, there are rims
That's
on some of them,
drinkable.
and others are just plain.
That have to
Yeah,
be 40 feet tall. I
right.
mean, holy cow, that's such a it's hard to understand. But as you said, these things exist everywhere, and we know they suppress the information on them. It's kind of like one of the other fascinations that I have that I've always tried to look upon was Father Crespi's treasures. And, subjects that refer to a lot of the things that he got, they narrate around factual or reproductions and so forth. And I think it brings us back to this scenario that always puts us back in the same place where we have these questions, that we search for the answers on. But that's because it seems like there's an overreach of something that can coordinate whatever they want, own countries, own museums, and the best things go to the most hidden places in the world because other people have interest of them. The same as like when we were talking about the Ark in the East being found. It's almost like it's a script written. It was never a magnitude that was once said of weapons of mass destruction. We went there for other things. That's just the way it narrates around so much. Omar Gaddafi tried to create a river and create a green desert. And hundreds and hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, I think 17 maybe, I don't know. I don't want to be wrong here. I don't like to miscalculate, but this pipeline was huge, and he promised to create a green area and have it thrive and give parcels of land to people and keep it for his people in the best ways possible. And anytime there's something where there's good being placed, a narrative of bad has to, be that part of the cognitive dissonance to clog the value and make it look like the conspiracy.
Yeah. And North America, especially in the United States, are famous for taking some of the giant bones and artifacts and anything that doesn't go along with the cookie cutter version of history. And Smithsonian Gate is that they would just dump them in the Atlantic, just get them out of sight, out of mind.
Wow.
But you go down to Peru, there's a museum with the elongated skulls on display. And we went to a museum in the Sacred Valley, and I met the archaeologist who found one of these elongated. He was a toddler. Its head was as big as the torso, just to illustrate how big the heads were. And It was buried with the royal Incan bloodline people at the very top of this mountain. So they had been greatly revered, these giants, and in many cases were the lords or sometimes even the gods, as described in some of these ancient that they existed alongside the smaller sized humans, but they were the ones running the show, and they would have the humans work for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Understand. Remarkable conversation. Thank you so much. I got to let you go. I'm going to push you away because I know that you got to hit and do some things. You explained that to me, and I don't want to
Yeah.
feel so bad going into my evening saying this man came on and did such a wonderful thing for me. And you did. I want you to know that. Thank you for opening the doors for the other people out here, some of the smaller people. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to do and give the best impact of information that I can, that I learn from everybody to progress, to help the future and help the children and put true history into their laps because of where it's failed. And you're a big part of that. I can't thank you enough for it. Your work is just outstanding. You're a very good human being. So again, and if you ever want to come on, you just feel like chatting with somebody, or you have a PowerPoint that you're trying to get out for any reason, please keep me in mind. The door's open. I'm sure you have many of them there. But from me to you, I want you to know, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time today. You're a rock star.
Well, thank you for having me on, Michael. It was great talking with you, and you're a wonderful host yourself. And we're all just doing our part to try to help people understand all that's been withheld from humanity, and
Right.
to get people prepared for what could be disclosure at a worldwide basis, where we're going to have to really come to understand a lot of this stuff and the exopolitics of what they're doing here and what we're doing here and what our interaction is. So we're coming into a very exciting period in human history, and I'm just glad to play my small role, and you too. So let's just keep doing what we're doing, and we'll definitely get on and do another interview one of these days.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Brad Olsen. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Michael. Again, thanks for having me on. And any of your listeners want to go to my websites, bradolsen.com is where you can find my conference schedule and other projects that I'm involved with. And CCC Publishing, 3Cs Publishing.com, one word, is my book publishing website. My books, as well as the authors we publish, are on cccpublishing.com. And any orders of my books that go through that website, I'm able to sign copies for people too. So shop there first, or you can find them in bookstores nationwide or Amazon and all the other bookstores as well.
Great work. Great work. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for all you do for the community and all the communities. All right. You have a great evening. Thanks so much.
You too, Michael.
Okay.
Talk soon.
Talk soon. Bye. Wow, everybody. That was like rock stardom. I mean, really, we try to cover a lot of different things this afternoon for you. You know what I did forget to do today, guys? I mean, you might have noticed this. I'll show you in a minute. I don't know if I could even do it. I started to think about it during the show's time, and I was like, with my luck, I'll try to do it and I'll screw it up. I could have did it. I didn't know that I could do it. I really didn't. I had up the wrong background. So I hope you enjoy Brad. Again, he speaks everywhere. Fascinating individual, 19 books. I mean, plus when you really look into the background of all the other people that he's helping. I also have some other shows coming up. Me and Mark Ully are going to be doing a fascinating series into the Templars, the Knights of the Templars, and the true roots of the life of them. Who were they? Because it's many things said, like noblemen and more, were actually the founders. And then the women of the Knights Templars. Were there? Well, there just may have been. So, I think you'll enjoy that. I also have an abundance of other guests that have been invited on, and a lot of them are saying, yeah, I'd love to. So very soon you'll be seeing who some of these people are, but I appreciate who you are. Please like and share. I'm kind of liking, where am I right now? Facebook jail. Yeah, I did a political event the other night with Beth McCord on America, and it's just a bad word. You can't even put your name up anymore. So I didn't even do it under my regular format. I creatively made up a new theory of a format just to see if I could test the waters, and I proved it right. The minute I didn't use my normal format words in my titles, it was able to have a huge outreach. The numbers were incredible all the way across the boards because you guys helped. And thank you for that. Well, I'm still under punishment, just so you guys know, because it happened shortly after the show got released, because we talked about today's news. And the fact, and which I thought was, I don't know, maybe somebody reported me. There's just vicious people out there. But nevertheless, I come up with this other theory of a name, and it worked. It worked. And, people still came in. They realized who it was when they scrolled down and they saw, me. But thank you for that. So if you can please share it to your pages or any of the groups, I can't do nothing. My hands are tied. But that's not all true. We'll get it out there one way or another. There's other people with other potentials. It just sometimes you have to download the show and so forth. But we'll get through it, right? We'll get through it. That's what we do. I also have Joe Bargan coming on. The man that killed Dogman, at least one of them. Okay, I'm just saying it like that. And then I have a few other people. I mean, I have a good lineup. I can't wait to see you again. I really can't. Thank you so much for having me into your homes today. This is America Disclosing Uncensored. What's in Disguise? And I screwed that up by not having my What's in Disguise things in. But what a great adventure going to the Antarctic. That was amazing. I can imagine what it'd be like to go through the waters out there and, to be sick for days on end. Just to get there and have to deal with all that kind of stuff. But I wish Brad that he can get to the point where he needs to, because it's not a cheap trip. That's for definite sure, to make a documentary and to film it all. Because his journey is the information we seek. Takes a lot to put it together. I'll just say that. But thank you for being with me. I'll be trying to check in on my Facebook page here and there and whatnot. So if you can share it anywhere at all, I don't care if it's in political, whatever, if you can. You guys have a great night. I'll be seeing you soon. Promise.